Hi, I'm Donna Hanson. Welcome to the Expert Insights Show. We provide you with practical insights and information on topics to help you in business and in life. Enjoy. In this Expert Insights episode, I'm speaking with JYeo. Aside from working as a communication coach, assisting business leaders to engage with intent, since late 2009, John has been the licensee and head of curation for TEDx Melbourne. Hi, John, and welcome.
Hi, Donna. Good to see you.
I'm looking forward to finding out more about engaging with intent and particularly about your involvement with TEDx in Melbourne.
Yeah.
I've always been curious about TED and TEDx. Now, for the uninitiated, what's TED and what's the difference between TED and TEDx?
Sure. It's a good question and a relatively common one. TED began as a conference in 1984. And so it started in California, and so they ran that for many, many years, and then they decided to do a global event, which moves around Rio, Scotland, all sorts of Africa, and they became the two TED events that we all know and love, which were all recorded. A little bit later on, they decided to do what's called a TEDx license, which is an independent license that is run by a local organizer in that geography. So because I'm in Melbourne, I have the Melbourne-based TEDx license. And so each geography has its own TEDx license as well.
And I guess that makes it easier for them to create a bigger brand, a more global, truly global audience, and a mechanism for them to develop more content and obviously get the message out.
Yeah, absolutely. Got it in one.
So what was the journey to becoming licensee and head of curation for TEDx Melbourne? I'm guessing probably somebody just didn't come and knock on your door and say, hey, we've got this awesome opportunity. Would you like to, a bit like door-to-door selling?
Look, there still is an application process, but effectively back then, TED, that type of community, the future-focused, optimistic, proactive type communities was a bit of a rarity back then in 2009. And so it became my tribe. And so while I wasn't the founding licensee, I was part of the team that began the organization. And she had to decide in 2009 whether she was going to run the next TEDx Melbourne or organize her wedding. So it kind of landed on my lap. I didn't want the community to die, and it just sort of the rest of the say is history.
Ah, awesome. Now, just an additional, out of the blue curiosity factor, is there a licensee fee you have to pay? Let's not talk about numbers, but a fee, and does it generate revenue?
Yeah, no, there is no fee, but the license expires the moment you run your event, and it's renewed based on whether you're within 10% of the global net promoter score. So,
oh, wow.
So that's the hard part, because that's really hard to keep up with.
Well, I guess that's a benchmark designed to keep you focused on the end goal, which is making sure that every event you create is engaging.
Exactly. And so all our effort is focused on event and experience design.
And what do you think has made both TED and TEDx so popular globally? Because, you mentioned TED or TEDx and instantaneous recognition worldwide.
I think it's largely because, TED began as the convergence of technology, entertainment, and design. So that convergence really led to worldwide launches of things like CDs and the Apple Macintosh, which before they were released to public were shared amongst the TED community. So it became sort of a space to see the future and see the possibility of the world. And so I still think it continues to do that very much around its core principle of ideas worth spreading, where it's not the idea necessarily, but it's the worth spreading part that then becomes the interesting part of the brand.
Yeah, there's no shortage of ideas in the world today, is there? So did the establishment of the TEDx brand, did that change the dynamic of the content that was involved in TED? Like, is it straight line that it must be technology, education, entertainment, design?
Entertainment? It didn't, because I think one of the things that's unique about that community is that we're all a certain mindset around, like I said, future focused, optimistic, proactive. And so it just became a bit of a groundswell, an on the ground community run by the community, owned by the community, shared by the community. And I think that was its power. It was able to bring the power of that community together and still capture and cultivate those ideas and inspirations.
Awesome. So I know this is probably a challenging question, one that I'm going to throw on you out of the blue. Do you have a favourite TED or TEDx talk, or is that like selecting your favourite child?
It is a little bit. It is a little bit. I like different talks for different reasons. Sometimes delivery, sometimes it's perspective, sometimes it's insight, sometimes it's just beautifully done.
Yep.
But I think one of the smartest ones that culminates all that is one by Derek Sivers called Weird or Just Different. And the beauty of it, it's only 2.5 minutes.
Oh, wow. Is that unusual for a TEDx? Because
Do you know what?
what's the time frame you're normally giving?
Yeah. So historically, they've been up to 18 minutes. That was back, way back when. Today, the average TED Talk's about 9. So 2.5 still short, but I think the attention spans of the community is definitely getting shorter. Yep. And so the talks are sort of reflecting that.
Okay, so I know there's a whole lot of other questions I want to ask as well, but I'm going to ask one final question about the TED element. Do people spend a lot of time working on their ideas and refining their ideas, or is it one of those things where people say, I'm going to do a TED Talk and off they go?
Well, I think different organisers approach it slightly differently, but I think in the main, that quality expectation is starting to go up. And so for me, I will personally work with a speaker anywhere between 8 and 27 hours with them to get their talk right, plus practice, which, can probably be, anywhere between 50 and 150 hours.
All for that tiny little bit of time. It's like rehearsing for a theatre play or a TV show, I guess, isn't it?
Totally. Look, it's not unlike the Olympics. I mean, if you're doing the 100-metre dash, that's literally 9 seconds of your life that you might spend 4 to 8 years preparing for. And, a TED Talk I would approach it the same way. It's a great opportunity.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So I'm sensing, based upon, your other work, that there's a bit of a link between TED, TEDx, and your work as a communication coach for leaders. So you touched on that there with the coaching of potential or of people who are presenting for TED and TEDx. What does engaging with intent mean for you, and why does it matter?
Engaging with intent is really around the impression underneath the idea you have. So in my world, there's 3 sort of core pillars in terms of communication. There's the content you share. And a lot of people say content is king. And I would say, well, content is kind of minimum now because content's everywhere. And so you really have to have good content before it starts so you can stand out. Context, which can be things like the nature of your interaction, the time of day even can be really important, or the nature of that interaction. And then the intent is really around, well, what is your belief or purpose for that relationship? And do they trust your intent? Have you built that trust and rapport? Because if they don't trust you, then it doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth. And I think a lot of people just kind of go to their social media or their marketing, just stand at the top of the building with their megaphone and yell their message out, expect the hordes to come running in. It just doesn't work that way anymore. And there's so many modern examples now where brands differentiate themselves because their intent is really done well.
Or clear.
Yeah. Clear is also a critical part to that.
Absolutely. So the sorts of people that you might engage or that might engage you to help. So, for example, you talked about presenters at the TEDx events. Are we talking about business leaders? Are we talking about executives? What are the types of people that will generally be looking for some type of purposeful, focused communication coaching in this manner?
Yeah. So in my work, it's typically CEOs and their direct reports, the senior leadership. Occasionally, it's the sales teams. And then for sort of medium-sized businesses, usually the business owner. So anyone who's got to connect and engage very, very quickly, build trust and rapport, and really make that impact, really get that impression really, really quickly. Otherwise, the opportunity is lost.
So I'm sensing it could be twofold. It could be, for example, a CEO who might be wanting to communicate with intent downwards through his organisation or her organisation, as well as a CEO who might want to communicate with intent outwardly as far as their brand message is concerned.
Yeah, exactly. So it tends to be announcements or innovations that need to be launched. And those announcements might be internal, they might be external, but it's something that's important and declarative that needs to be said and noticed.
And absolutely, those sorts of things are vital, and even the slightest nuance or the choice of a wrong set of words, as we all see in politics, just the wrong set of words at the wrong time sent in an automatic reaction mode can have a huge impact, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to sort of call it out as saying the right thing at the right time to the right person in the right way.
Yeah, that certainly encapsulates it, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So our listeners and viewers today are probably thinking to themselves, what sort of things could they change or adapt in their interactions to have greater engagement and be a bit more intentional and maybe a bit clearer and get towards the outcomes that they're after, John?
Yeah, I would say that largely a lot of people are underprepared. And while you don't always got a chance, sometimes you have to be impromptu. I think the opportunities where you do get the opportunity, being clear about what you're going to say and being clear about the value you want to create for the listener then should become an important part of your messaging over and on top of what are you going to say? Because what are you going to say is going to come out anyway. So you might as well do it in their favor so they can see you in the best possible light or your message in the best possible light so that there's a relationship established as opposed to an information transfer.
So it sounds like starting with the end in mind, to use an old adage, what's the outcome that you're looking to achieve? Because you could just go out there and talk about just about anything and people go, well, walk away going, oh, that's really nice, but I'm not called to move on something or take action. So it sounds like primarily the first thing you do if you're working with someone is identify what it is the end objective or the purpose of what they're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the key pieces that I get people to focus on. There's certain political constraints, there's certain social constraints, there's certain timing constraints you've also got to factor in. But without that clear endpoint, it's really difficult to plan backwards where you need to go and how you need to go about it. Because if you're worried about just pure information transfer, put it in the internet, send it in an email. There's multiple ways to get information out there. But to build that real trust, rapport, and relationship then becomes the key attribute to really a great foundation for further conversation.
And I think sometimes what people do when they're looking to communicate and they've maybe got the outcome is they've got so much information that often what they do is, I call it verbal diarrhea. Sometimes they just say everything and they try to get the audience to be the ones to decipher and work out what are the relevant pieces of information. I'm guessing you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's particularly pertinent in the virtual space where it's so easy to get distracted and overwhelmed and just go and do something else. And there's nothing you can do about it. So density, timing, tone, speed, all these other things then become factors that cause someone to engage with what you're really wanting them to hear. And it's part art and part science.
And you talked a moment ago about distraction. Have you found that engaging with intent in your work has changed as a result of the last period of time that we've been through the coronavirus pandemic, that what people have needed to do and how they've needed to approach their communication has changed as a result of the fact that we're doing far more virtual than we've ever done before?
I don't know if it's changed. I mean, so for me, the medium is just another context.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just using this context more than we have in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So if you weren't experienced in this medium or this context, then it's something you need to bring up to speed. But for people who are already there, then there's an opportunity to build on that and then take advantage, because more and more tools come out every day with different feature sets and different capabilities that you can then take advantage of. And so knowing your tools then becomes an important part of that. And it's just like any other skill, then it's just another tool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, look, I could probably talk for hours around a whole lot of different things. And I know you and I have actually talked off air for quite some time regardless. But one final question I want to ask. As you know, I'm passionate about productivity with technology. And I'd really love to know, with all the work that you're doing, with the TEDx and also your communications coaching, would you share your favourite tip that you use to keep yourself productive? Now, there might not be, again, it might be like choosing a child. You might need to choose a couple, but that's okay. There's no rules here.
Right. I think and this comes back to focus again. And it's quite an analog one because I used to type this up, but I don't anymore. I actually have it on and literally have a post-it note. Top 6 hardcore, but basic, Top 6 things. Stack rank from 1 to 6. Write it every night. Get up in the morning, start with number 1 and don't do anything else until number 1's done. Then start on number 2, etc. This allows you focus. There's no pop-ups. There's no distractions. There's clarity when you get up. You don't have to think in the morning because thinking is one of the most time-consuming and energy-consuming efforts that you have. And, just do it every night. That's for me, probably the single biggest focus. And then you know me, I have lots of tech plays and technology things, being a tech person myself, that I like to sort of tweak and play with as well.
Yeah, I think I'm very much into that too, the tactile nature of something, plus the visual thing with the Post-it note is it's there, and the sense of clarity you get, by scratching one off or ticking the box or whatever it is that's your mechanism to mark off something has been done. And, like you said, analog stuff, I think often what we're looking for, what people are looking for now are the next thing that's going to solve the problem. But realistically, I believe we've already got everything we need to be successful right now. We don't need something else. It's just a matter of putting all the pieces together to achieve the outcome that you need to achieve or want to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And simplicity is almost always the best.
Absolutely. You're spot on there. Now, John, if our listeners or viewers want to get in touch with you to explore how you can help, or perhaps they're curious about TEDx or TED, regardless of where they are in the world, maybe they want to attend an event, where should they go?
So for the TED related stuff, it's TEDxmelbourne, one word, .com. Of course, it's one word. For my work, I have a website, and then I'm actually quite active on LinkedIn. So feel free to kind of look at my stuff on LinkedIn. If you do connect, just put a little note though, because I find that the people who don't tend to be wanting to sell me something, and by a general rule, I don't accept them anymore because I just get sold too much. So just put a little note. More than happy to have a conversation. And I have some articles there as well, which might help.
Wonderful. Yeah, look, I'm the same with LinkedIn too. I figure if you can push the button to send me a link, you can afford to type a few more keystrokes to tell me how you found me, or, that we know somebody jointly, because even something like that can make the connection a little bit more comfortable than just I want to join your network.
Yeah, and it's clarifying the intent again. I understand the nature of our interaction and the nature of the value that we want to create for each other. And that's what LinkedIn's all about, I think.
Awesome. Well, John, thanks so very much for your time today and for your insights on TEDx and for engaging with intent. Thank you for joining us for this Expert Insights episode. Until next time, this is Australian productivity and technology expert, Donna Hanson. Have an amazing week.